Hey guys, we are back with actually a follow-up video to our previous video about the announcement and pre-order sales of the Neo Geo AES Plus. And when I say we, of course, I mean with me as always is Corey.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
And my brother Chris.
Hello.
And before we dive into this follow-up video, I did just want to quickly say in the previous video, I had said that the AES Plus had sold out. Turns out that was not the case. The reports that I was hearing at the time from other YouTubers and comments were apparently caused by kind of glitches or issues that in many states, in the United States at least, websites where people were supposed to be able to pre-order, the customers were getting messages like sold out or not available. And as far as I know, a lot of commenters are reporting on our first video that they were able to pre-order with no issue. So if you are looking to get it, hopefully you still can.
Yeah, and I can confirm it's available because I pre-ordered one for myself yesterday with plans to use it for development and not just for fun for our new Metal Mac game.
Awesome. And that was on Amazon in the US, right?
That's right. I got the white one that comes with a cartridge and a controller. I needed that cartridge so I can make sure that during development, if my code isn't running right, I can rely on comparisons with a known good cartridge.
Of course, we've been following the news and watching other YouTube videos on this topic, and we thought there were still several points that we had touched on, but they were late in the video and we didn't get into fine details or specific numbers and that kind of thing. So we wanted to cover those topics and those points more upfront. Some of the things that we thought were really interesting were just the huge range of reactions to the announcement and the very different frames of mind or points of view of people. There's the old school hardcore Neo Geo collectors that not only want that physical, tangible experience of not only owning but interacting with the game box, the game cartridge, the console, having that full experience again, but they also care about owning the original hardware, the original games, even though that comes at a kind of cost. And then we're obviously going to get a different generation of Neo Geo collectors. There's a lot of people, including myself, that grew up wishing we could have the Neo Geo, but it was always outside of our price range. And so there's a lot of collectors, I think, who are much more casual about it, but it's still the AES Plus is really attractive. Now it's within a reasonable budget to get the exact experience, even though they are not technically the authentic original generation Neo Geos. It's kind of like now you can date the Cindy Crawford Plus. So like...
I'm also thinking of like when my daughter started collecting cassette tapes for new music. She didn't really have cassette tapes as a kid. She grew up when CDs were already out a long time ago. It was just the novelty of it. Not nostalgia for her, but like my nostalgia is a novelty for her.
Yeah, even for a lot of old games that I'll play these days, games that might have been made 20, 25 years ago sometimes I am looking out for those games that I did miss, that I wanted to play back in the day even. So this is a console version of that, you know?
Yep. And then I would assume your daughter would not care, Chris, about whether or not the cassette tape she got is an authentic one that was actually produced back in the 80s or late 70s or something. For her, it's
the media itself, the format was something she could hold in her hand.
Exactly. And that's the big thing that a lot of more modern gamers or gamers that either never had or never cared about that aspect of it, that only care about playing the game, seeing and hearing what's on the screen. Those were the kind of people that had a very different reaction from the collectors that I think largely are trying to recreate and relive. Even if they didn't have the Neo Geo, we still had very similar experiences that were very positive to us, like the Genesis / Mega Drive, the Super Nintendo. We want to relive that tangible physical experience.
And that thought process as game developers that's extended into what we do. A lot of those early systems are what inspired us to make games in the first place. Nowadays, we're taking a shot at making those games that we always wanted, that we thought could have existed back then.
So remind me to get back onto the topic of wanting to recreate the experience and how it relates to the additional cost of development. But as people who want to recreate not just the game, but the full experience with physical physical versions of games, that's an enormous amount of extra thought and production work that we have to put in to design the boxes, work out all the visuals and wording even, and design the manuals and all that stuff. We're going through that now with Damon Claw as we get really close to wrapping up production with the Neo Geo version, Speak of the Devil. So anyway, yeah, there's that whole side that it's not just a physical experience. It might very well be collecting and having tangible things you actually own that might actually increase in value. There's all those aspects that a lot of the later generation gamers, that's going to seem like very alien concepts to them potentially, because it's not something they grew up with and it's not something they have any nostalgia for.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how different the perspectives are between a Steam game collector and a physical Neo Geo collector. The Steam game collector will often have a library of sometimes hundreds of games they've never even installed, whereas the Neo Geo collector pays substantially more money to complete a collection or get that hot new game that they really like the looks of. It's just completely different. So when they're both commenting on the same thing, you get like whiplash almost.
Yeah, I've always been kind of both kind of gamer. I had a lot of physical cartridges and CD games and stuff when I was young, early PC games, all that stuff, even back to floppy drive stuff. But I entered the digital realm and I've got a decent Steam library of games too. So that's why with our games, even though we're making physical versions, we still like supporting Steam and everything with our games or digital marketplaces.
Absolutely. And that's one of the exciting things to us about the AES is as a creative person, as a developer of games, yes, obviously we need to be able to pay the bills and eat while we're making the game, but we also very much want as many people to end up playing the games as possible.
It would make our development lives easier if we just targeted the Steam version, but that's not what we're interested in doing. We like to create games for the classic consoles and thrive within the limitations those machines bring. It makes things much more interesting than the unlimited power of a modern PC.
Yep. And I could speak for myself. I also, as someone that did grow up with physical games, I love the idea and the challenge. There's a separate form of creativity that you get to enjoy, the creation of as premium a unboxing experience as we can creating that really nice manual. And of course, we have the benefit of Corey here, who just does an absolutely fantastic job with that whole graphic design side of things. And
thank you. But also, we're even to the point now where we want to design a magazine.
I think we're describing our nostalgia, not just as gamers, but also as developers. Like, we want to make the games for the old console and make the magazine like we used to read when we were teenagers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that gets into the bigger topic that we wanted to get into. The big shockwave of the AES was the whole price point and how it makes collecting the replica of the original system and the re-release of some of their classic games at a much more affordable price point, and that people might think that that's also going to lower the price for new games developed for Neo Geo. And while we certainly, as developers and collectors, hope that can happen eventually, the only way that can happen is if so many new people not only buy the AES Plus, but are willing to buy new games and are willing to pay enough for the games that will cover the development cost. So, like, we've seen quite a few comments online where they clearly have a perspective that is putting massive emphasis on the actual manufacturing cost of cartridges. And the basic thinking is, if PlayOn can sell at some kind of profit level these classic games on the cartridges, then therefore new games can be sold by roughly the same price and still make a profit. So the biggest issue by far is that whole difference between re-releasing a classic game you made decades ago and made back far more than all of your investment money a long time ago. So basically everything on top of that is gravy. quality compared to the immense amount of work and time required to make a whole new game, and what price do you need to charge, and how many people do you need to get to buy your game in order to be able to make that game, and especially to make more games in the future?
Yeah, it seems like up until this announcement, really, as of days ago, Neo Geo gamers was a pretty small crowd of people, and you're going to only sell so many copies regardless of what you might charge.
Yeah, we experienced that with funding for Damon Claw and Metal Mac, which were both offered for the Mega Drive and the Neo Geo. You're inevitably going to get far more backers for the Mega Drive, where the profit margin isn't as big for the Mega Drive, but you're much more likely to get more backers no matter what kind of game you make if it looks like a high quality game, whereas it's a bigger risk factor currently. And while the reaction to the AES Plus is looking really good, we don't know yet what percentage of those collectors will be interested in new games, and then of course of that percentile, will they be interested in the specific games we're making, and then the new kind of wrench thrown into things of that percent. If they're really used to this new price point and they don't understand the difference between the cost of developing a totally new game as opposed to just manufacturing and throwing the ROM of a 20-plus-year-old game on it, what percent of them will be willing to pay a few $100s for a new game as opposed to $90 for one of the other classics that they don't own yet?
Yeah. I wanted to touch on that thing you said earlier where you said the profit margin on the Neo Geo is higher.
Yeah.
It is compared to the Mega Drive per unit, but a lot of that Neo Geo profit is invested in additional months of development.
Yeah, an enormous amount of man hours.
Yeah, for our project Metal Mac, we want to make sure we can get everything working and looking right, but it is a lot of extra time. I mean, you're going from a 64 color palette on the Mega Drive to really an almost infinite number of palettes and higher color fidelity. So there is a lot of extra artwork that goes into upgrading for Neo Geo, or even making something from scratch for Neo Geo. We did similar upgrades to Damon Claw, and Mike, you put a lot of extra work into the unique playable character that is unique to the Neo Geo as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of price points, we have huge respect for the fact that until it is able to be changed, the hardcore Neo Geo collectors that actually support the creation of new Neo Geo games, we want to make sure they get their money's worth. That's so important to us, and that's why Metal Mac campaign, we estimated many additional months of purely working on the enhancements for the Neo Geo version.
Yeah, and speaking of art, I mean, it's me and Mike here, just so people are aware, we are very small indie developers.
Exactly. There were some comments that were along the lines of, well, now that you'll have more Neo Geo buyers, there's no excuse. You should, not us specifically, but any indie developer, you should be able to sell it for like, $90, $100, and you could have a small team now, and you could make a Neo Geo game and sell it for this newly established price point. So we wanted to make the point, like actually some of the math of just what kind of margins an indie developer is actually facing. For very good reasons, a Neo Geo collector is expecting a high quality game, not only because of the price they're paying, but because all of the existing games in the Neo Geo library, that now they'll be able to get at least some of them for just $90 pop. It doesn't matter if you have a big team or a small team, you have almost no chance of selling an even remotely adequate number of games to the backers if it doesn't at least hold up well to these AAA quality games that were made in the past by teams that tended to average more like 15 people, and at least a core team of something like 5 or 6 people would be working full-time, or let's be real, this is the game industry, overtime for well over a year.
And that's just the developers. Not everybody else involved in marketing or anything like
marketing, debugging, and going back to the point of small teams like us, we have to wear every hat. We need to invest all of those man hours on top of the actual development of creating the art, creating the code, playing and iterating and working on the gameplay design and polishing it until it's actually a really fun game. These are all enormous tasks that take a huge amount of time, whereas the, to us, giant teams that made those AAA Neo Geo games back in the day, they were working within an entire very established infrastructure with existing code bases, tool chains, and other people were handling the marketing. Other people were handling the box art.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so people are aware, we design our own box art. Mike, you did a fantastic job with the art on the cover of Date McCall, by the way.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, and the Kickstarter campaign is often more than the game alone. But of course, manuals, which also has nice art on it. I think the designs that Corey did for Metal Mac look great too.
Yep, and there's trading cards and all that kind of stuff. It's a huge amount of extra work that usually would have whole other dedicated teams working on that kind of stuff. So going back to that topic of perceptions and prices and things like that, one thing I think is extremely common is people will see a successful crowdfunding campaign and look at that big number and just kind of imagine themselves all of that money in one lump sum and thinking, boy, could I have fun or live a super comfortable life for a year with that much money or that kind of thing. And it can be incredibly deceptive. In a previous conversation, a great point Chris made is that even some indie developers, especially starting out, make that same mistake. They think, okay, if we fund for this amount, surely we can make the game. And here's why you have to be really careful, and how most people have some pretty huge misconceptions about those numbers. So right off the bat, keep in mind when you look at a crowdfunded campaign, we're going to talk specifically about Kickstarter because that's where we have the direct experience. The money it shows you that it funded for right off the bat, it includes the shipping costs. So of course, that money needs to be completely reserved and set aside so that it's there to use to actually pay to ship the physical products to everyone once they're actually finished in development and produced. But then you've got just the more obvious stuff on top of that. There's banking fees to get the money to you. There's Kickstarter's fee. They take a certain percentage. I forget how much. And then there's the ever-present taxes that you have to worry about at the end of everything. And of course, the physical, actual manufacturing costs of things, which, as we've said, in the Neo Geo case is pretty enormous. And while we hope that will change and go down in the future, and Chris, you had an interesting point.
Yeah, one of the assumptions that people make when they see something like Neo Geo cartridges now being produced at greater numbers is they might assume that that definitely means the price will go down for everyone who wants to get a Neo Geo cartridge made. Yeah. And ideally that would be the case, but it's also possible that the companies that make the Neo Geo games for that big player will demand as much or more for what leftover capacity there is after making those games. Like in the RAM memory space, we've seen it with AI, where these AI companies have said to the RAM manufacturers, we're going to buy the first 3 million RAM sticks you make ahead of time. And they said, deal. And now anyone that wants RAM is now paying 3 to 4 times the price that we were paying a year and a half ago.
Yep. So that's like part of what we're saying is it's not a simple thing. We have no idea what's actually going to happen. We're talking about potential possibilities, but some people that we see commenting on this topic think it's a very simple, this is bringing the price down, so therefore... ... So many things could happen. There's the other possibility, like some people have commented, well, then the independent developers need to just go to PlayOn and have PlayOn be the ones to manufacture the cartridges for them. And the issues there are nobody knows if PlayOn is going to offer that opportunity to anyone, if they're interested in that. And even if they were, then if any indie developer has any chance of developing a game for Neo Geo, it gets filtered through that one company that decides, okay, yes, that game will make us enough profit or won't, or what if an indie developer is making a kind of game that is potential competition for a game that's already in their library that they're going to re-release, or a new game that they might end up working on. Suddenly you can have basically gatekeeping and the kind of squashing of potential projects and creativity from other developers.
Yeah, in the history of video games, you see that a lot. A company gets too big, a very large publisher that has a lot of power, and it can make or break developers. And a lot of those kinds of practices are the reason we became indie developers in the first place, that kind of thing.
So getting back to the idea of seeing the Kickstarter funding and what the numbers actually mean versus the kind of perception. So a kind of easy way to just start out thinking about the numbers is at least a third of it is basically untouchable money that the team members cannot use at all to do things like pay their rent or pay for food while they're actually working on the game. And then now the concern is how big is your team and how much does the money need to be divided? And then how long is it going to take to make the game? So again, to make a game that's competitive with the Neo Geo, where games tended to be made by, you need kind of a dream team to have even the slightest chance, if it's a small team, to make a game that is attractive to Neo Geo collectors to have a chance of funding well enough to actually pay for things. So to get into a little more concrete numbers, let's say you have a dream team where only 3 people are required to make the game, and they're capable of working the amount of overtime hours to get it done in a year. Even with those extremes, that very unlikely combination of having the best team working at incredible speeds, if you actually divide even a very well-funded campaign, then you're going to end up making far less than minimum wage working overtime for a year.
As an example of some of the development costs that go into making a high-quality video game, if you need a professional musician to create a soundtrack for your game, that will often cost a bit over $10,000.
Yeah, for our game Metal Mac, we knew that the music would be very important to the game, so we wanted very high quality soundtrack for it.
Yep, we were able to nab 2 fantastic, well-known musicians, Chris Halsbeck and Alistair Brimble, for the soundtrack, and it is sounding awesome. So that's basically the biggest kind of information points we wanted to make sure people were aware of. Keep in mind, even when a campaign funds very well for something as kind of niche as retro console game development, maybe once a studio is extremely well established and has a library of past games that are also generating revenue to live on, we are not talking about numbers here that do anything other than make it like the core team members might be able to go to bed at 2 in the morning instead of 3 in the morning, or something like that. It is not, we're not flipping through catalogs or online looking for a new yacht to get. If it funds well, that purely means now there is the money that can pay the rent and pay for food so we can make the game and invest everything we can into it.
Yeah, and we're definitely hoping that this is the kind of thing with the AES Plus that reinvigorates everybody's love and passion for all of these retro consoles. And we love making games for them, and we hope that there is a bigger fan base out there. We've seen a lot of this growing in recent times, and yeah, so I'm having a very positive outlook on it myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said, right now there's some confusion and misconceptions, and literally even people with some behind the scenes connections, we don't know what's going to happen, but we certainly hope for the best. And part of this video was just making sure anyone that really cares about this topic has some of that information from an interesting source, indie developers, that they might not otherwise have been able to get. And aside from that, I just wanted to say, for those still watching, thanks very much for watching. And of course, we are incredibly appreciative of all of you who are classic Neo Geo collectors, or like part of the new soon-to-be Neo Geo owners. It is entirely because of the Neo Geo collector base that for many, many years now, new Neo Geo games were possible. There was even potential for them to be made. So we hugely appreciate that, and we certainly hope that that grows, or that enough Neo Geo collectors do understand the numbers involved and continue to be willing to invest. It's not just about buying a game, it's funding the creation of that game and helping to ensure that the people that make new games can continue to do so. And we really appreciate that. But that's going to be about it for this video. For those of you who stuck around for the whole thing, thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back again soon with another video.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.
This one I backed though on Kickstarter. And you can see it's got an awesome front cover, but let's have a look what we've got inside. Full of goodies. Look at that. Oh, that is so awesome, isn't it? Look how cool they look.